President Cyril Ramaphosa has travelled to France to support the Springboks in the final match of the 2023 Rugby World Cup against New Zealand in Paris tonight. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has repeated his call for a ceasefire, describing the conflict between Israel and the militant group Hamas as a moment of truth. A very good afternoon. If you've just joined us, we're coming to you live from our studios here in Johannesburg. Welcome to Week in Review. Now, this is the program where we review some of the biggest stories to come out of the week. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalan. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has arrived in Paris, France, to support the Springboks in the final match of the 2023 Rugby World Cup. This is against New Zealand in Paris tonight. The Boks, who are the defending world champions, advanced to their second consecutive World Cup final after they narrowly beat England 16-15 in the semi-finals in the French capital. Ramaphosa says South Africans should rally behind the boys. He left last night to support the team in their quest for glory.
As the number one fan of the Springboks, we're about to take off, go to Paris, go and cheer our boys, encourage them to fight, a good fight, and ensure that they bring the cup home. As I take off, I'm going to be telling them they have the hopes and the great wishes of our population. 62 million of South Africans are behind them, will be cheering them, will be holding them up also in prayer, making sure that they emerge victorious. So this flag will be flying very high tomorrow night after the victory. And at the same time, we also cheer our Protea boys, who are also representing our country extremely well. And we wish them the greatest of luck as they battle the other teams to make sure that they emerge as the champions of the world as well. So we are in a good space as South Africans, and all we need to do now is to stand behind our two teams and make sure that they feel the weight of our support, which is precisely what I'm going to be doing, together with others, and Minister Zizi Kodwa as well, Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture. So off we go to go and bring the cup home. Thank you very much.
Now, the All Blacks say they'll have to put in the best performance of the year if they want to beat the Springboks tonight. Both teams are looking to rewrite history books at the Stade de France. The winner of the match will become the first team to lift the Webb Ellis Cup for a fourth time.
An epic battle is expected between rugby's two most prolific sides. Both are three-time world champions and both are looking to be crowned the world's best once again. The All Blacks have made just two changes to the squad that thrashed Argentina in the semi-finals. At lock, Brodie Retallick is back in the starting lineup, with Sam Whitelock joining the replacements. Tight head prop Nipo Laulala replaces Fletcher Newell on the bench, which sees a 5-3 split between forwards and backs.
Nipo is a very strong scrummager, very experienced, and he's trained so well. He's disappointed he probably didn't play the last two, but this is a great occasion for him. And alongside Samasoni, with the likes of Sammy Whitelock on the bench, really believe we've got a lot of confidence in that group coming off.
New Zealand say they've dealt with many emotions this week. They've received a lot of support and are determined not to disappoint their fans.
Dealing with all the messages we're getting from home, and even people in France have been massive, and I have to thank them for for an awesome support that we've had from the local people too, but managing all that so that we can just go out, put a smile on our face and play our game. And that's what we're focusing on.
The players say nothing but their best will do against the defending champions.
Each week we're trying to get better, and we're going to have to be at our very best on Saturday night, defensively and attackingly, and attacking. So, yeah, that's our mindset. We're going to have to put out the best performance we have all year. And if we do that, then we'll give ourselves a good shot.
6 of New Zealand's matchday squad are previous World Cup winners. The group has a total of 1,387 caps, making it the most experienced All Black squad for any of their record 5 World Cup finals appearances. Liesl Willifier, SABC News.
Now, many would agree the world knows Siya Kolisi. In rugby circles, he's a giant of the sport already. And if he lifts the Webb Ellis Trophy again on Saturday, history will be made, from humble beginnings to conquering the rugby world. But as a man, he's also known for his humble demeanour.
The legacy of Siya Kolisi is growing. Future rugby stars will play on this field, named after him earlier this year.
I don't take this lightly, and I know it's not a small decision, and I'm so grateful. And yeah, it's a huge honor. I love this school. I always support this school, and I've take a huge responsibility in what I need to do as a human being in the society.
Yes, we've certainly been so proud of everything that Siya has achieved over the years. He matriculated here in 2009. I've been fortunate enough here to be 20 years and been here 20 years, and I saw him arrive in grade 8 and grow up to being a top-class rugby player, playing SA schools for 2 years, etc. And obviously his achievements in more recent times, like captaining the Springbok winning World Cup team. What a fantastic achievement, and we're certainly very proud of those achievements. And now the award that he'll be getting from the President, that's just the cherry on the top, you know, for Siya, and certainly and the school itself is just so proud of what he's achieved.
Kolisi was a scholar at Msengeni Primary School in Zwide before he received a scholarship to further his studies and his rugby at Grey. The playing conditions at Msengeni were not conducive to honing his budding talent. He also played for the African Bombers, feeding his hunger for competitive rugby. And the Bok captain always returns to his roots when he comes home, remaining grounded. His success also remains a motivator for children who still go to school at Msengeni and the people of Zwide.
We feel very proud, especially our kids are very motivated when they see Siya. Siya is coming from the township. Now when they see Siya, his achievement, all of them, they want to be Siya. We are very proud of Siya, and it's motivating our kids.
I feel so happy with all that Siya has achieved. Siya and I grew up together. We used to play rugby here on the street. When I look at him now and all he has achieved for black people, it makes me so happy. And my prayer is that he achieves even more.
The award-winning documentary on his life, Rise, also made its world premiere in Zwide, again making his community part of his success.
He was 16 years old.
Siya is also a member of the Order of Nkamanga, an honor President Cyril Ramaphosa bestowed on him in gold. There are many people who have contributed to the man Siya Kolisi has become, but one man spotted his talent when he was just 11, kickstarting his storied career.
That is good work, you know. So at least to be recognized by his own country first. Maybe others are still coming, you know.
Now, only 18 minutes against our fiercest rival stands between our captain Siya Kolisi and lifting the World Cup for the second time. Legendary status beckons as the world watches. Lerato Fekisi, SABC News, Gaza.
Now, the mother of Bongi Bongi Mbonambi, vice-captain of the Springbok rugby team, says he carved out his own future. Sheila Mbonambi says her 27-year-old son predicted he would one day be part of the South African rugby team.
The community where Mbongeni Theo Bongi Mbonambi comes from are beaming with excitement. They can't wait to witness him on the rugby field for the World Cup final match. His loved ones described the talented hooker as a humble, kind and friendly person. Since the inception of his sports career, Bongi, as he is affectionately known, is said to have always gotten along with his rugby teammates. Starting the tough sport in grade 5, his mom believes he worked hard and was disciplined to seize every opportunity that presented itself.
As they are heading to the finals, I would say good luck, Boke. Do your best, God will do the rest. Bring it on, New Zealand. Siya, my son, it's a pity that you are in the midst of Matlaila, people who cannot sing. If I was there with you, singing in that tunnel as you're about to go out into that field, I would be singing along with you and saying, Dashia bazali bam, mina no wam, siwelele, oh siwelele. Dashia bazali bam, mina no wam, siwelele, oh siwele, wele, siwelele, oh siwelele. Go again!
His former coach says Bongi has always been eager to learn. Although his mother was initially worried about him due to the bruises he would have on his body, his passionate spirit made him strive through the various challenges he encountered.
Stay humble, Bongi. Play your heart out. Do your best. And remember that the whole of South Africa and Trader Kestel, of course, your primary school, is behind you 100%.
Those who molded Bongi's schooling and career are elated with pride.
Bongi was a learner here at Trader Kestel, so we're very proud on him. And I know the Springboks will do it on Saturday. So Trader Kestel, and from the office side,
Bongi and Mbonambi, Trader Kestel, the learners here, we are so proud of you. We are so proud that you are part of the school and you inspire a lot of kids here to play rugby.
Oh, super excited. We've been excited since he was young, but now it's even better. Him being a captain lately, it's getting better and better. The feeling in our hearts just grows because, I said, we knew him since he was so tiny, and he never even played rugby when he was in grade 4. He only started later, grade 5 or 6. And we're just immensely proud and so glad that the Free State is on the map. Bethlehem is on the map thanks to Bongi.
Community members are expected to show their support by watching the final match tonight in support of their local star and the Springbok team. Refile Mekwa, SABC News, Bethlehem.
Bongi, Captain of South Africa, good luck!
Now, meanwhile, hooker Chili boy Rapelle believes the team's strategy to dominate the match from the onset gives them an edge to clinch its 4th World Cup. Rapelle was part of the Springbok squad that was eliminated in the quarterfinals of the 2011 Rugby World Cup.
On a last-minute drive to garner support for the Springboks, former Springbok hooker Chili boy Rapelle believes the Boks have all it takes to defend the cup. In addition to playing in the 2021 Rugby World Cup, Rapelle played several matches against many high-ranked rugby teams. He believes the fielding tactics of the current Springboks gives them a better chance of returning home with the Webb Ellis Cup for the second time in a row.
It's going to be a colossal challenge, and the game that rugby has been waiting for. Each and every spectator, nations have been waiting to witness these two giants collide. And my expectation, obviously, Rassie set the intention from the start, and we can see with the 7-1 split that our intentions as South Africa is just to go out there and dominate them up front, soften them up front, and make sure that we give our creative backs an opportunity to be able to strike when the moment does come. So obviously with the weather conditions, again, it also plays into our hands, because I believe we've got the two strongest packs in the world, which is our starting pack and our bomb squad. So it's just for them to go out there and making sure that they leave it out there. Just as Sia said, they're going out there to do it for the nation.
Some rugby enthusiasts in Hoedspruit say they expect an exciting final.
It's going to be an amazing game. I had the privilege of actually travelling to the quarterfinals, and I watched the Springboks play live at the French Springbok game. It was amazing. The All Blacks and the Springboks have both beaten the Irish and the French, and each team has both beaten the other, so it's going to be a beautiful final.
I believe we as a nation are standing behind them, knowing that they will give everything, and it's going to be one big thriller, because the All Blacks and the Boks have won it both 3 times, and I think they are going to give it all just to see who's going to lift the World Cup for the 4th time.
A primary school 2-day sevens tournament was held in Hoedspruit. Tournament organizers believe it is important to focus on young players to ensure that the next generation of Bokke players are ready to carry the baton.
It starts with us. It starts with us to get the next generation of children and boys to be the next Bokke and the next Springbok players, and we have to focus on the development of boys at a very young age. So that's why we've got this tournament from under 10 to under 13 years, so that the boys can just practice on their skills.
Rally Pele also visited his former school to rally support for the Springboks. Biman Baloi, SABC News, Hoedspruit.
Let's take you to Cape Town now, where rugby fever is running high across the city ahead of the clash between the Springboks and the All Blacks. And South Africans from all across the country have been sending messages of support for the boys.
South Africans are in high spirits ahead of the Rugby World Cup final, and learners and teachers at Paulus Joubert Secondary School in Paarl are in a celebratory mood. They have sent messages of support and encouragement to the Springboks ahead of the clash between the two titans in world rugby, South Africa and New Zealand.
The feeling, the gees is absolutely amazing at Paulus Joubert. And we want to wish well to the Boks, and especially to our ex-learner, Kurt Lee Arendse. There's Jet Lee, there's Bruce Lee, but there's only one Kurt Lee. An absolute amazing player, a very humble guy, and we at Paulus Joubert, where our motto is, Nihil difficilius, nothing is too difficult. We want to send Curtly that message of support from Paulus Joubert.
It was here at Paulus Joubert Secondary School where Springbok flyer Curtly Arendse played his schoolboy rugby, and he has made his alma mater proud.
Well, it's a great accomplishment, and we as a school are immensely proud of Curtly. And in actual fact, he was always part of my lessons for the past few months, because he's quite inspiration to our school and our community.
Learners at the school say they are excited for the final.
I was just very excited, and I hope they have a good game and just have fun. Yeah. Go Curtly!
Learners at Sea Point High School in Cape Town also sent their message of support to the Boks with singing and dancing. Preparations for watching the final are well underway across South Africa. Meat and alcohol are top sellers as braai and rugby go hand in hand.
I've got so much kiss. The entire team are behind the Boks. We want them to bring it home, and you can feel it. It's palpable in the store. People are wearing their Boks jerseys. Everybody's singing along. We've got the kiss playing here on the radio, and as we can see, customers are here buying all the stuff that they need to get ready for the game.
The Springboks will be looking to defend their Rugby World Cup title when they take on the All Blacks in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final in Paris. It will be the first time since 1995 that South Africa and New Zealand will clash in a Rugby World Cup final. And the whole of South Africa will be behind the Springboks. Corbin August, SABC News, Cape Town.
All right, we now cross live to SABC Sport reporter Simon Burke, who's in Paris for us. Simon, in just under 8 hours, the Springboks take on their old rival, this being their 106th clash, but the second World Cup final for the two. Just take us through the history of these two rivals.
Well, the history is immense. The All Blacks do have the edge over us, but it's a rivalry that goes back as far as rugby came into creation. It was the two countries that took to the sport the most, the two countries that devoted their resources to the sport the most. In terms of the World Cup, I think New Zealand edge us, but only just. However, we have the 1995 Rugby World Cup final win over them forevermore. This is in a sense, a replay of a final of that ilk and a chance for New Zealand to set the record straight. But whatever happens, this is one of the healthiest rivalries in world rugby. It's the strongest rivalry, and it is absolutely the crown jewel for world rugby when we talk of matches. And that it's happening in the final of a World Cup, it just speaks volumes.
Win there against New Zealand, because we've been listening to many of the pundits taking us through just the statistics that here of the 105 tests, you had the All Blacks winning 62, we won 39 and drew 4, and then of course they have the 3 World Cups, and us in this instance would also just fall slightly short. But you're saying that we need to remember that 1995, where it mattered in just that World Cup, we were the ones that were the victors there. So you would say that gauging everything, do you think we have a strong likelihood of taking it this time?
We have to believe. I mean, this is a project that the Springboks have been working on for 6 years now. Rassie Erasmus came in. He delivered a World Cup in 2019. It was kind of a rescue job. They always said that they were planning, the long-term plan was for 2023. Jacques Nienaber, he stepped in as the coach. Rassie Erasmus was the SA Rugby Director of Rugby. Together, they worked tirelessly to come up with a foolproof plan to keep the succession of the team going and to make sure that we always had our bases covered. This is what's happened now. We got all the way to the final. It was a meticulous plan. You could see it right from the off. We wanted to get to this final, and we needed to avoid the All Blacks in the quarterfinals, and thus we have our wish of an epic showdown. And yes, in terms of World Cups, us and the All Blacks are the most performing nations that Rugby World Cup has ever seen. Both of us 3 World Cup wins to our names. However, we edge them in the sense that we have been to the final 3 times and we've walked away with the cup on all 3 occasions. This will be our fourth meeting against a nation in a final, and hopefully, because we've never experienced a loss in a World Cup final. So that stands in good stead for us. In terms of the All Blacks, we use them as our yardstick as a nation. We are always a little bit off. Mostly the statistics will tell you that. Yes. But that's because we need them and they need us to keep pushing each other. And they are our measuring stick to see where we are and where we need to go. In this final, however, we need to go straight through them to get our trophy back.
Most certainly we do. But let's just look at New Zealand's form throughout this World Cup. I mean, it was a weak start, something that we know all too well about, what happened with us in 2019, starting off weak but ending off strong. So, again, what have pundits that you've been interacting with stated or predicted for this particular match?
I think both of these teams are a testament to the fact that this is how you play World Cup rugby. You just get through what you have to get through. You get to the next phase. Yes, New Zealand started weak. They lost to France. They came off the loss against South Africa at Twickenham. So there was a lot of negativity going on in their camp, but they pulled it together. They got some big wins together, and then they walked into the quarterfinals, into the semis, and through. It was that quarterfinal against Ireland where they stamped their intentions, made it clear that this is what they were going to do. They were going all the way to the final. And the world had to sit up and take notice. Same with South Africa. We drew France in the quarterfinals. We showed our intentions. And then on to England, where again we showed our winning mentality. We didn't make it easy for our supporters, but we did enough to get into the final. Now both teams are there. A clash of styles, two very different teams, and it's all setting up for an epic.
I love that you mentioned Twickenham, because many people are saying that has probably made us more confident that this was just before the World Cup got underway. And based on that, we've gauged that this could be a breeze for us. But is it not dangerous to just be overly confident when it comes to New Zealand?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the Twickenham when honestly it was a practice match, a World Cup warm-up match. Yes, it's always good to get a win over New Zealand. Yes, test matches against the two nations are always going to be of the utmost caliber. But again, just let's not put all our eggs in one basket. That was a good win, but in the end it didn't count for very much, being that it was a warm-up. We need to get that kind of a win when it counts. If we can get that scoreline in the final, then that means that we really are as good as we think we are. We have to make sure that we use the match if right from the go. No mistakes can be made. And that's what I kind of felt like with New Zealand at Twickenham. It was a warm-up match, and they were using that match to test the waters, to test the referees, to see where they could go, to see what boundaries they could push, and it backfired on them just a little bit, but they didn't lose anything in the long run, and so both teams are into the final.
And just before I let you go, Simon, I'm going to ask you the question you've probably been answering the whole day. How is the atmosphere? It's because we really envy you there. How is it like?
Well, I'm at a rugby village just outside the Stade de France in the little town of Saint-Denis. It's not very picturesque, but the square here where we are at is very picturesque. It has a beautiful cathedral, lovely municipal buildings, and a few little bistros around the town square. So in terms of giving off that little idyllic French lifestyle, this ticks all those boxes in the city centre, so to speak. But the atmosphere is not that great at the moment. We're still getting there because, of course, it's a 9 p.m. kickoff, and supporters have to pace themselves. They can't wake up earlier and get out there. They have to make sure that they've got it for the long haul. There's a long night ahead of us. 9 p.m., we're not used to that. Normally everything's wrapped up by then in South Africa. Here it's only starting. So we have to get into the swing of things and into the French way of life. It's going to pick up. It is going to pick up.
No, indeed it will. Simon, thank you very much for that reportage. That's my colleague that I envy so much, Simon Burke, who's out ahead of that final clash for us this evening at 9 o'clock. Now, the support for the Springboks has brought throughout the World Cup period has been boosted business activity in the hospitality sector. Restaurants and pubs are getting ready to host scores of patrons that will gather to watch the final match between South Africa and New Zealand. The Restaurant Association of South Africa says the excitement that has built up in the past few weeks has been a much needed boost to many establishments.
It's going to be incredible 80 minutes.
As Rugby World Cup fever intensifies and South Africans are getting ready to get together to watch the final match, it is a busy time for restaurants and pubs getting ready to host patrons. The sector was hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it continues to battle load shedding in the difficult economic environment characterized by low economic growth and the high cost of living hitting households' disposable incomes. The Restaurant Association of South Africa says the economic spin-offs of the World Cup have been great for business, and more jobs have been created in restaurants and also for vendors on the sides of the roads.
It's a great time. You know, it's a very short-lived time for us to take advantage of the economical benefits, but it's done great things for us. And it's not only about making money. For our industry, it's about bringing people together and reminding them that we are South African, regardless of what walks of life we come from, and that there's this beautiful country to preserve that we've inherited, and that we can all take care of it. And the slightest bit of hope and passion that is ignited by a World Cup rugby team is phenomenal, what it's done for South Africa generally.
OTG Bar and Kitchen in the north of Johannesburg says business has been booming, with patrons coming in to enjoy the atmosphere and watch matches with others. With the final this weekend, they expect more people to flock in. The restaurant says patrons have been booking tables since last week and that they've had to bring in extra tables to be able to accommodate more people. Grant Alexander says following the difficulties brought by COVID-19 and the load shedding, the World Cup has brought welcome traffic to the establishment.
We've secured a couple of extra tables, chairs. We've been fully booked already from last week Saturday, but the guys have been phoning in non-stop throughout the week just to try and see if they can get space. But we're trying to accommodate even the walk-ins, so we've got a nice bar area as well. So the bar is open for any walk-ins as well.
Experts are, however, warning South Africans to be mindful of their spending when they get ready to enjoy the rugby festivities this weekend.
Us as South Africans, we love celebrating, and doesn't sport just get us together? What normally happens is that we tend to overspend by making sure that we have enough drinks, enough meat for the braai, and we go on as though there's no tomorrow. So there's a word of caution to everybody to say that, yes, the rugby is amazing. I mean, we're playing against the All Blacks. You can see I'm smiling because I think we're going to win. But there's also caution because what you have around the corner, we've got the festive season around the corner, and what people tend to do is overspend and not plan their spending.
South Africans are waiting in anticipation, hoping for the Springboks to again bring back home their Webb Ellis Cup. South Africa faces New Zealand in the Rugby World Cup final on Saturday night. Gloria Sefako Mosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Hear the nation's call and get ready for the game. I have the power and energy to keep going.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has meanwhile repeated his call for a ceasefire, describing the conflict between Israel and the militant group Hamas as a moment of truth. Guterres was speaking after the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly passed a resolution calling for a humanitarian truce that Arab countries proposed. The final tally was 120 countries in favor of the resolution, which included South Africa. Now, SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce Peace released the statement last night.
It demands an immediate ceasefire and for the parties to comply with their international law obligations. It demands immediate unhindered provision of essential goods and services to civilians in Gaza, humanitarian access, the rescission of the evacuation order that Palestinians move from the north of Gaza to the south, and the release of all civilians on both sides of this conflict. Essentially, that's what the resolution says. I can tell you now that it has just been adopted by the UN General Assembly. 120 countries in favor, including South Africa, 45 abstentions, 14 no votes. The text required 2/3 of UN member states present and voting. It exceeded the 2/3 threshold, 120 in favor. So the General Assembly succeeding here where the UN Security Council has failed.
All right, now to talk more about this, the UN General Assembly vote and resolution, we're joined by Sami Hamdi. He's Managing Director at the International Interest. Sami, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. So as we heard that the General Assembly voted overwhelmingly in favor of the resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian truce. But that terminology alone, or wording, took up much attention because there was a move from a call for a ceasefire to a truce. Just your take on just that aspect firstly around the wording and the back and forth we saw.
I think that it shows that the United States of America remains very much committed to trying to prevent a ceasefire, trying to provide political cover for Israel to at least have an opportunity to commit this genocide against the Palestinians. If you look at even the voting itself, with 128 countries voting in favor of a pause in the fighting, at least, it shows that overwhelmingly the public opinion and indeed the stance of most of the world is certainly against the US and the Israelis. And this is why that when we look at the terminology, it appears that the US buckled under pressure. The US, which has been refusing to call for a ceasefire, the US Secretary of State Blinken, who has banned his department from using the word ceasefire as a result of the global pressure from countries such as South Africa, which recognizes apartheid, or at least recognize what apartheid looks like and knows what's taking place in Israel and Palestine. The US has buckled under that global pressure and has been forced to make a concession. The extent of the concession, the US has resisted being forced to call for a ceasefire, but has decided to concede in calling for a humanitarian pause, which in and of itself is something that ideally the US would not wish to see, or even the Israelis would not wish to see.
But
so while there's
call,
a debate,
apologies for interjecting there. Apologies for interjecting there. That call for a pause, which was now with the UN Security Council, was vetoed now by Russia as well as China, because again, these particular countries were concerned about that wording, saying a humanitarian pause is very vague. They don't know how long it would be for. Is it 1 hour, for a day? So it seems wording yet again is a problem, because here we had the UN Security Council failing to take a stance on this particular crisis. And now again, we were seeing them being concerned about the framing or wording now when you call it a humanitarian truce.
I think that when it comes to Russia and China vetoing the humanitarian pause, I think that's to humiliate the United States of America and bring this issue to the fore and pressure them into calling for a ceasefire. Whether it's because they actually want a ceasefire or whether they want to humiliate the Americans is a very different matter altogether. But certainly the wording in and of itself is a crisis, primarily because the reason that the word ceasefire is not being used, the sole reason that it's not being used, is because the United States of America does not want to rein in the Israelis, or does not want the world to rein in the Israelis. And that's why it's such a severe contention over the wording. And that's why we saw last night the Israelis turn off the internet over Gaza and try to make an attempt at a ground invasion and bombard Gaza, essentially trying to commit genocide while the world is not necessarily watching. So I think it's, as you said, it's a huge failure on the part of the Security Council. It's also a failure of the international community in that they're unable even to actually convince or to call for a ceasefire in and of itself. But certainly I do think that the Americans are buckling when they're starting to talk about humanitarian pause. It shows that they're feeling the pressure, and the onus now is on other countries such as South Africa and the like to keep up that pressure, because now that the US is buckling, it's about trying to get them to fall over and finally call for that ceasefire.
And we all know that, of course, the resolution is non-binding. But when listening to America's Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield addressing the House, in as much as she was emphatic in their demand that Hamas needed to be condemned in that particular resolution and mentioned, not just where you have a vague condemnation of the attack, they wanted them named, but also wanted the inclusion of the wording around hostages that must be released unconditionally. But broadly speaking, the posture, though, and tone, listening to Linda, it was more softer in approach, almost as though they were buckling under pressure, as you say, because here at the beginning of her address, she referenced the lives of Palestinians that had been lost, whereas the tone before, we would have heard them referencing Israeli lives lost. But this time around, she went on to state that all lives, starting though with the Palestinian lives that have been lost. So do you think there is, at least from where you're standing, some sort of a change in posture and tone from Ms. Greenfield?
I think certainly so, and I think the Americans are feeling the pressure. There are leaks in the Financial Times reporting that the G7 diplomat has said that the West has lost the global South and we can no longer rely on their support on issues such as Ukraine. American journalists are now touting this as a watershed moment in the relationship between the US and the rest of the world. I think that also when you see the very strong stances being taken by the global South, by countries such as South Africa and others who suffered under apartheid, who suffered in those histories and are standing firmly alongside the Palestinians and their rights and their freedoms, I think the moral argument has been obliterated that the Americans have been trying to press And I think that the Americans, as you've noted in their change of their language, even in their concession with the humanitarian pause, which is insufficient but still a concession in and of itself, reflects a concern amongst the Americans that they are losing public global opinion, that they are losing the relations with their allies. You'll remember that when the Israeli ambassador sought to speak and the American ambassador, the other delegates all turned their backs on their speeches. They didn't want to recognize those speeches themselves in the United Nations. It suggests that this issue is being felt so strongly around the world that there is increasing in open defiance of the US, which will have sweeping ramifications for the future of international relations between the US and the rest of the world. And that's why we're seeing a softening of language. It's certainly not enough, but it's a start, and it shows that the pressure is working. And that's why the onus now is on countries like South Africa, the African states, the Asian states, the global South, to keep putting that pressure, because the US is buckling, and it's time to ride that momentum to force them to call for a ceasefire rather than facilitating a genocide before our eyes.
And I suppose we keep speaking about the Americans possibly buckling under pressure because here they possibly have the greatest influence over in Israel in this instance, which of course voted against that particular vote. But with an America now having changed its tone, like you say, possibly could see them a bit later on calling for a complete resolution of some sort of peace in this region. But what is the likelihood, honestly speaking? Because, like I said earlier, it's non-binding. The only thing here, many would say, it holds political weight and has given us a sense of the world's view. And in the majority, we now know that the world wants there to be a truce that is effected in that particular region. So beyond that, though, we don't know if this could at some point lead to some sort of a truce, in fact.
That's very true, but I do think there are certain dynamics which suggest that the Israelis and the Americans are under significant pressure, aside from the global public opinion and the United Nations. It's been reported today that Netanyahu is trying to prevent the families of the hostages in Israel from holding protests against Netanyahu. Netanyahu has not visited any of the funerals or met with the families of the hostages because he fears of the backlash. He knows that 86% of Israelis, according to the latest polls, blame him for what's happening and blame him for the crisis. And Netanyahu is concerned that if he de-escalates now and stops this war, he will have to face an Israeli public that is demanding his resignation, and that he will go down in history as the man who brought about the worst threat to Israel since 1948. And this is why the focus is a lot now on Netanyahu, in that all of the dynamics suggest that everybody's ready for de-escalation except Netanyahu, who's concerned about his political future. And I also think there are signs today, there are reports that the general that the US sent to help the Israelis plan their offensive against the Palestinians has returned back to Washington. And there are indications that the reason he's returned is because the Americans are frustrated that the Israelis are not listening, and that the Americans are not necessarily particularly inclined to a ground offensive because they believe there's no clear strategy and it won't actually achieve any of the strategic aims. The cracks are beginning to show. The cracks in the relationship are beginning to show, and I do think that there are more signs to suggest that certainly there is the prospect of America changing its position, but it requires, as we've seen with global public opinion, as we've seen with other nations raising their voices, raising their awareness, and making it untenable for the US to continue supporting the Israelis. As I said, the US is buckling. It's about riding that momentum and forcing them to trip over and finally call for a ceasefire. And I think that's possible if the momentum continues as it is.
All right. Sammy, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That's Sammy Hamdi. He's Managing Director at the International Interest. Now, Hamas says its militants in Gaza are ready to confront Israeli attacks with full force after Israel's military widened its air and ground attacks on the Palestinian enclave. Israel has been conducting an intense campaign of aerial bombardment since an October 7th attack by Hamas. Israel says 1,400 people, mostly civilians, were killed and more than 200 taken hostage. Since then, Palestinian health authorities say Israeli bombing has killed more than 7,000 Palestinians.
International humanitarian agencies are defending casualty figures provided by Palestinian officials in Hamas-controlled Gaza, after U.S. President Joe Biden cast doubt on the numbers. There's no dispute that Israeli attacks on Gaza have killed many people since Hamas launched their own attack in southern Israel on October 7th. But Biden said on Wednesday he had, quote, no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using, without saying why. Omar Shakir is the Israel and Palestine director for Human Rights Watch one of the humanitarian agencies defending the figures.
When we've done independent investigations that verify death tolls for particular strikes, our numbers have always been generally consistent with what the Ministry of Health in Gaza has put out, with no major discrepancies.
Gaza's health ministry responded with the release of a 212-page document. It contains the names and identity numbers of around 7,000 Palestinians said to have been killed in the Israeli bombardment of the enclave. Israel has not provided its own estimated death toll. The UN and other international agencies say there can be small discrepancies between the final casualty numbers and those reported by Gaza's authorities in the immediate aftermath of attacks. However, they consider them broadly accurate. Shakir said agencies, including the UN and the U.S. State Department, had previously cited the Gazan Health Ministry's figures.
This creates a fog of war, a fog of misinformation, which can provide political cover for more large-scale atrocities to take place. The conversation should focus on how world leaders can stop further mass atrocities and not nitpicking whether a number that's generally proven to be accurate may be a little bit off.
Calculating death tolls is a difficult task. Palestinian officials reported difficulty in identifying and counting victims after some attacks because of dismemberment. On Friday, a World Health Organization official said the agency had received estimates that some 1,000 unidentified bodies were still buried under the rubble in Gaza, but did not reveal the source. Those figures were not yet included in death tolls.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, emergency workers have described the horror they faced after arriving at the apartment inferno in Marshalltown earlier this year. Many described how difficult it was to contain the runaway fire in the hijacked building, with exits and entries blocked and fire hydrants broken. An independent commission, chaired by retired Justice Sisi is probing the cause of that blaze. Investigating officer Bongi gave testimony and provided visual evidence on day 2 of the inquiry.
Over the last 2 days, the independent commission into the Marshalltown fire that claimed the lives of 76 people has been hearing evidence from first respondents on what they found when they arrived at Albert Street on the 31st of August. Investigating officer Bongi was the 6th witness to be called. He compiled 800 pictures from the scene. He was led through the images by evidence leader advocate Ishmael Semenya.
Some of the images are too grim for public viewing. I would propose that when we go through various images, we do not include the most graphic of them. The material would have been made available to the various teams that are here. They would have access to that to understand the complete picture, but we want to deal with them.
Ngadi's evidence reaffirms testimony that the building was a ticking time bomb of hazardous, flammable material. Witnesses also described the challenges firefighters faced entering the hijacked building, as emergency evacuation exits were blocked by boxes, bricks, and even locked gates.
It shows that there is a possibility that there was a person who was trying to pull it up so that he can get escape from the room.
The fire is believed to have started on the ground floor and was extinguished on the 3rd floor. Ngadi says that many attempted to save their belongings from being engulfed in the flames.
There were belongings of the people who were staying in the building that were left on the rooftop above that floor.
Yes.
They were taken there they were trying to evacuate their belongings from fire.
The commission has been given 6 months to investigate what caused the tragic fire and recommend who should be held accountable. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, this week saw over 500 mine workers at Gold One Mine in Springs, east of Johannesburg, spend 3 days underground in what was described as a sit-in, resulting from the standoff between the employer and the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, better known as AMCU. The labour union claims that it has since obtained a large majority of the workers over the National Union of Mine Workers. AMCU says it was unsuccessful to gain recognition and as a result decided to stage an underground sit-in until management can act on their demands. SABC News spoke to some of the miners who are underground.
After 3 days underground, the miners resurfaced. Some were taken to hospital, while some were reunited with their families. SABC News caught up with some of the miners who were underground to share their experience.
If we got food underground, then we wouldn't have gotten out today. But because from Sunday we ate our lunch boxes when we were about to get in, usually we have lunch boxes for the night shift, we ate and went underground. From Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we didn't eat. We survived only on water underground.
The situation wasn't good at all. Nothing was inspiring. The situation was really bad underground, but we tried to be above the situation to show the employer that our plea is serious, that we are asking for a better life than the one we have, so that we can be successful. Because we have faith in succeeding, where we see that success is attainable. That is what gave us strength under the horrible situation we are facing. I was underground. The situation underground while we were there wasn't right. Number 1, we were hungry. Number 2, it wasn't hygienic. Number 3, there was a lot of smoke. Number 4, they didn't provide anything for women. You know that women are meant to get sanitary stuff. They didn't provide. On the outside, the media is saying that we got food each and every 3 hours. We didn't get anything.
It was difficult. The hunger, and we are women. We need to bath. 3 full days. It was difficult for us women.
No one fed us, no one gave us food. We had to hustle, which is Tolugudla. And lucky enough for me, I was with the electricians, whom they have workshops underground. And they have locals there whereby they still had their food there. So we managed to share the food. We were plus 10 of us who were sitting in one workshop, and the rest was just outside. So we managed to share the food, but the food ran out around Tuesday morning. So from Tuesday morning till Wednesday morning, we had to drink tea and water only.
For now, operations at the mine remain closed. AMCU President Joseph Matunja said workers affiliated with AMCU should return to work when they receive communication from the employer. Mpumelelo Mapalala, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And that's where I leave it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully after lifting the trophy tonight. Enjoy your afternoon further.